The most bizarre deaths often feel like they're ripped from the pages of fiction. But trust us, these are all real and truly shocking. From freak accidents to mind-blowing coincidences, you won't believe how these people met their ends. These stories are so ridiculous, they'll leave you speechless. Get ready for a wild ride through the most insane deaths ever. This is 1 hour of most ridiculous deaths of all time.
It was February 22nd, 2008, in Swansea, South Wales. A 34-year-old graphic design student, Adam Deely, attended a photography exhibition at the Monkey Cafe nightclub. Originally from Birmingham, Adam had moved to Swansea to pursue his degree, working part-time at the club to support his studies. He wasn't working, but enjoying the event with his friends that night. Adam was known for his friendly personality and love of having fun. As the night went on, a spontaneous eating contest began among the attendees. It started as a light-hearted joke, seeing who could stuff the most fairy cakes, small sponge cakes, into their mouths. One person managed to fit 3, then another fit 4. Adam caught up, decided to join in, and attempted to cram 5 cakes into his mouth. However, things quickly took a serious turn. Adam realized he couldn't breathe and started choking. He walked towards the toilets, likely trying to spit out the cakes. Unfortunately, his friends initially thought he was still joking and didn't notice the severity of the situation. One of Adam's friends, Daniel Finselbach, noticed something was wrong and followed him to the toilets. There, he saw Adam convulsing, struggling to cough up the cakes. Daniel immediately attempted the Heimlich maneuver, trying to dislodge the food from Adam's throat. Despite his efforts, Adam collapsed and hit his head on the toilet. Paramedics were called immediately. They arrived within 10 minutes, but by then Adam had already gone into cardiac arrest. They rushed him to Singleton Hospital, continuing their attempts to revive him, but sadly, Adam was pronounced dead at 3:20 a.m. The news of Adam's death shocked everyone who knew him. Amanda Davey and Paul Dyke, the owners of the Monkey Cafe, were devastated. In a statement, they expressed their deep sorrow and offered condolences to Adam's family, calling it a tragic and avoidable accident. An inquest into Adam's death was held, confirming that the cause was choking due to the blockage of food in both his upper and lower airways. Dr. Maurizio Brotto, who performed the post-mortem, verified this. The coroner, Philip Rogers, recorded a verdict of misadventure, emphasizing the risks of such actions, saying, "It doesn't take me to say that trying to fit as much food in your mouth as possible is dangerous." During the inquest, it was revealed that Adam had been drinking that night and had about 1.5 times the legal drink-drive limit of alcohol in his system. However, Dr. Brotto explained that this level wouldn't have significantly impaired Adam's judgment, especially since he was used to drinking. The spontaneous nature of the cake-eating contest was a key point of discussion at the inquest. Stephen Jenkins, another attendee, explained how the contest started. "There was a tray of cakes from the buffet. My friend tried to fit 3 cakes in his mouth, so I tried to beat him by putting 4 in mine. Adam heard about it and tried 5. I saw that he was struggling, but then he walked towards the toilets." Daniel Finselbach, who had tried to save Adam, described what he witnessed. "I saw Adam walk towards the toilets, his body convulsing. There was cake around his mouth, and he was struggling to breathe. I ran after him and slapped his back hard, then tried the Heimlich maneuver, but he collapsed." The coroner's ruling of misadventure highlighted the accidental nature of Adam's death. Philip Rogers stressed that activities involving large amounts of food are inherently dangerous and should be avoided. He also clarified that the bar staff did not organize the cake-eating contest, but was an impromptu act by the attendees. Adam's family was deeply affected by his sudden death. He was their only child, and his parents, Sandra and Robert, were too devastated to attend the inquest. The last time they had seen Adam was during a visit to his university in December, just 2 months before the tragedy. They were proud of their son and his plans to move to New Zealand after finishing his studies. The Monkey Cafe community also mourned Adam's death. Flowers and tributes were laid outside the cafe in his memory. Paul Cunningham, a sound engineer at the club, expressed his sorrow and urged others to be cautious with similar pranks, warning, "Don't play these games. They can end in tragedy." He described Adam as a kind person who is loved by everyone and will be greatly missed.
It was June 5, 2014, in Novato, California, when the Moylan family faced an unimaginable loss. Sean Moylan, a 27-year-old known for his kindness and wit, lost his life after falling from the Golden Gate Bridge. His death carried an even deeper resonance as his grandfather, John Moylan, had long fought to make the bridge safer by advocating for barriers to prevent such tragedies. John Moylan was a well-known figure in San Francisco and was celebrated for his dedication to public safety and community service. Born in Ireland, He immigrated to the United States in 1951 and devoted much of his life to union leadership and improving lives. As a board member of the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District, he spearheaded efforts to install a barrier on the bridge to prevent deaths. His mission became personal after losing a grandnephew under similar circumstances, strengthening his resolve to address this issue. After years of debate, the board approved a barrier plan in 2008. However, progress was slow, and construction wasn't completed for years. Tragically, despite John's tireless advocacy, his grandson Sean became one of the individuals the barrier might have saved. Sean had faced significant emotional challenges for years, despite being seen by many as a bright and caring individual. Earlier in 2014, he survived a life-threatening accident in Eugene, Oregon, when he stepped in front of a moving truck. Evidence suggested it was an intentional act. Though he recovered physically, his emotional pain lingered. Family members, including John, spent time with Sean after the incident, believing he was healing. Just days before his passing, Sean appeared upbeat, joking, and enjoying a meal with his family. On the afternoon of June 5th, Sean went to the Golden Gate Bridge. At around 4:22 p.m., the Coast Guard recovered his body from the waters below, confirming the tragic loss. For John, the heartbreak was profound, as he had spent years fighting for the safety of others on the bridge, only to lose his grandson there. In interviews following Sean's death, John spoke candidly about his grandson's struggles. He described Sean as a generous and good-natured young man who had battled inner pain. Refusing to place blame on the bridge or anyone else, John acknowledged the complexity of his grandson's struggles. He had a problem, and that's it, John said, emphasizing that no single factor was responsible for what happened. Despite his grief, John remained committed to his mission. Just weeks after Sean's death, the Golden Gate Bridge Board was set to meet and finalize funding for a $68 million project to install a safety net under the bridge. This initiative was bittersweet for John. He had fought for it for years, yet it came too late to save Sean. Since its opening in 1937, the Golden Gate Bridge has become a site of despair for many, with over 1,500 lives lost there. On average, dozens of people attempt to take their lives at the bridge each year. John's work was a reminder that while barriers might help, broader solutions were needed to address mental health struggles. Even as he mourned his grandson, he remained determined to advocate for these changes. The Golden Gate Bridge's safety barrier faced significant opposition over the years. Critics raised concerns about its cost, aesthetics, and potential impact on tourism. Yet John persisted, believing every life saved was worth the effort. Under his leadership, the project eventually gained approval, and construction began, though it would take years to complete. Sean's passing underscored the ongoing challenges of mental health and prevention. While the safety barrier represented progress, John acknowledged it wouldn't stop every tragedy. For him, it was part of a larger fight against an issue that affects countless families. "This is an epidemic," John said, hoping continued efforts could bring change. John Moylan's tireless advocacy left an enduring legacy on the Golden Gate Bridge, transforming it into a symbol of hope for countless lives. Sean's heartbreaking story is a powerful call to action, urging compassion and awareness for struggles often hidden in silence. Through his grief, John's unwavering dedication to preventing future tragedies is an inspiring testament to resilience and the power of change. In 1906, in Brunn, Austria-Hungary, now Brno, Czech Republic, is remembered as one of the most influential mathematicians and logicians of the 20th century. His groundbreaking incompleteness theorems changed the way we understand mathematical systems. Yet despite his brilliance, Gödel's life was overshadowed by severe paranoia and mental health struggles, which eventually led to his tragic death. Gödel's early life was marked by illness. At the age of 6, he suffered from rheumatic fever. Although he recovered, Gödel believed this illness permanently affected his health, fueling lifelong anxiety and a preoccupation with his physical well-being. Over the years, he experienced several nervous breakdowns requiring hospitalization. Despite these challenges, Gödel's intellectual achievements were remarkable. He studied at the University of Vienna during the 1920s, when the city was a hub for intellectual thought. He became a key member of the Vienna Circle, a group focused on logic and mathematics. Under the mentorship of Hans Hahn, Gödel completed his doctorate in 1929 at the age of 23. His work revealed that formal mathematical systems were inherently incomplete, no matter how rigorous, a revolutionary concept that recognized him worldwide. In 1931, Gödel published his incompleteness theorems. His first theorem showed that any consistent mathematical system contains truths that cannot be proven within the system itself. The second proved that such systems could not confirm their consistency. This shattered the prevailing belief that all mathematical truths could be derived from basic axioms, securing Gödel's legacy. As his academic reputation grew, Gödel's mental health declined. The political turmoil of the 1930s, including the annexation of Austria by Nazi Germany, deeply unsettled him. Fearing for his safety and the possibility of being drafted into the German military, Gödel fled Austria in 1940 with his wife Adele Nimberski. The couple settled in the United States, where Gödel secured a position at Princeton University with the help of Albert Einstein, with whom he formed a close friendship. Gödel thrived professionally at Princeton's Institute for Advanced Study, but his personal life was plagued by growing paranoia. The 1936 death of his mentor, Moritz Schlick, who was killed by one of his students, intensified Gödel's fears of being targeted. He became convinced that someone was trying to harm him through poisoning. This fear grew so intense that he would only eat food prepared and tasted by Adele, who supported him through his struggles. As the years passed, Gödel's mental health worsened. He began experiencing hallucinations and developed an irrational distrust of those around him. By the late 1960s, his paranoia extended to friends and colleagues. Despite his continued contributions to mathematics and logic, his deteriorating mental state overshadowed his achievements. In 1977, Adele fell seriously ill and was hospitalized for 6 months. During her absence, Gödel refused to eat, convinced that any food not prepared by Adele was unsafe. His refusal to eat led to severe malnutrition. By the time Adele returned, Gödel's condition was critical. He passed away on January 14, 1978, weighing just 65 pounds. The official cause of death was malnutrition, brought on by his extreme fear of being harmed. Gödel's tragic death reveals how mental health struggles can deeply impact even the most brilliant individuals. His paranoia not only overshadowed his genius, but also ultimately led to his demise. While his groundbreaking work in mathematics and logic remains celebrated, his story is a reminder of the importance of addressing mental health challenges. What if Gödel had sought help earlier in life? Could his fears have been managed, allowing him to live a longer and more fulfilling life? His story raises important questions about how society recognizes and supports individuals dealing with mental health issues. Even the brightest minds are not immune to such struggles. Gödel's legacy is unmatched intellectual achievement paired with profound personal hardship. His story continues to resonate, reminding us of the balance between brilliance and the human condition. Lives can change in mere seconds in the most unexpected ways. It is a truth that the town of Lyshevo, nestled near the Volga River in Russia's Tatarstan Republic, came to understand on a fateful day in 2013. It began with a simple household task that spiraled into a catastrophic loss, leaving a young girl as the sole survivor of her family. It all started when Mikhail Chalishev, a 42-year-old law professor at Kazan Federal University, descended into the family's cellar. It was supposed to be a simple, routine task. But unbeknownst to Mikhail, the potatoes stored in the cellar had rotted, releasing what was a foul odor, and even more importantly, a deadly gas. Glycoalkaloids, naturally occurring toxic compounds in potatoes, had accumulated to lethal levels, creating a virtually undetectable trap in the small room. Soon after Mikhail entered the cellar, the noxious fumes completely overwhelmed Mikhail, and he collapsed, never to rise again. A short while later, when Mikhail failed to return, his wife Anastasia became worried. The woman, who was 38 years old, decided to follow him into the cellar, concerned for his safety. Sadly, this decision sealed her fate. She entered the cellar and was overcome by the toxic gas almost immediately. She collapsed to the floor, joining her husband in his untimely end. Their son, Georgy Chalishev, was alarmed by his parents' prolonged absence. After all, they were supposed to go into the cellar and get right back, something they'd done so many times before. Concerned, Georgy, who was only 18 years old, entered the cellar next, only to succumb to the same deadly fate. Meanwhile, Anastasia's mother, 68-year-old Iraida, became increasingly anxious. She couldn't help but feel that something was incredibly wrong with her family. She decided she needed assistance, so she called a neighbor for help. But Iraida did not wait for help to come. The older woman took the matter into her own hands and decided to act herself. Tragically, Iraida also descended into the cellar before help could arrive, sealing her fate alongside her loved ones. In a twist of fate that resembles something out of a fairy tale, the family's daughter, 8-year-old Maria Chelisheva, was the only one of her family to survive. When she reached the cellar, she saw that the door was open, which allowed the lethal gases to dissipate enough to spare the little girl. But the sight she encountered would forever haunt her. Her entire family, her father, her mother, her brother, and her grandmother, lay lifeless on the floor. It was too late. The aftermath of this tragedy left Maria orphaned and inconsolable. Maria Chelisheva was taken in by relatives, but nothing could bring her family back. Her dad, Professor Mikhail Chelishev, was honored by Kazan Federal University in a moving ceremony held in its marble hall. The devastating incident highlighted the hidden dangers of everyday foods. Potatoes, a dietary staple, can produce toxic glycoalkaloids such as solanine and chaconine, especially when stored improperly or allowed to rot. These compounds disrupt cell membranes and affect the nervous system, causing symptoms like weakness, confusion, and in severe cases, death. Exposure to light, age, and physical damage significantly increase glycoalkaloid levels, concentrating the toxins just beneath the skin. While rare, poisoning from potatoes can have fatal consequences, as this tragedy so painfully demonstrated.
It was August 7th, 1997, in Buxton, North Carolina, a small village on Hatteras Island. Daniel Jones, a 21-year-old student from Woodbridge, Virginia, was on summer break, enjoying a beach day with his girlfriend, Julie Baker. Daniel was curious and adventurous, passionate about the outdoors. He studied at Northern Virginia Community College and worked as a computer systems engineer. On this day, he was doing something he had loved since childhood, digging in the sand. Daniel had been on Hatteras Island for a week with Julie. The couple had been together for 4 years, having met in high school, and they planned to marry. Julie often joined Daniel on his beach outings, and this time was no different. She watched him dig a large hole in the sand, capturing the moment on her video camera. The hole Daniel dug was unusually deep, around 9 feet deep and 8 feet wide. He had spent most of the morning digging, likely enjoying the cooler temperature, and break from the wind inside the hole. Nearby beachgoers saw Daniel digging and assumed he was having fun. They didn't think much of it. Around 1:50 p.m., tragedy struck. The whole walls collapsed, burying Daniel under several feet of sand. Julie screamed for help, and people nearby rushed over. Panic quickly set in as they realized how dangerous the situation had become. The sand was heavy and packed tightly, trapping Daniel underneath. Tourists, locals, and rescue workers immediately started digging. They used anything they could find, from their hands to plastic toy shovels. Even Ollie Jarvis, the owner of a nearby tackle shop, handed out shovels to people trying to help. More than 200 people gathered, working together in a desperate attempt to save Daniel. Unfortunately, the sand collapsed into the hole, making it harder to reach him. It took nearly an hour before the rescue team uncovered Daniel's head. They placed an oxygen mask over his face, but it was too late. Daniel was pronounced dead at Hatteras Island Medical Center. The cause of death was suffocation. The news of Daniel's tragic death spread quickly, shocking those who knew him. His mother, Mary Ann Jones, spoke about Daniel's love for digging, recalling that it was something he had done since childhood. He always loved playing in the sand, but never dug that deep, she shared. Daniel wasn't just a regular beachgoer. He was also an Eagle Scout, known for his kindness and dedication to helping others. He regularly volunteered at a homeless shelter in Washington, D.C., handing out sandwiches every Friday night. His death left a deep void in the hearts of many who knew and loved him. Julie Baker, his girlfriend, was devastated. The couple had shared dreams of the future, and Daniel's sudden death shattered those plans. Friends and family gathered to mourn the loss of a young man with so much potential, whose life was cut tragically short. Locals and tourists alike questioned why Daniel had dug such a deep hole. Carol Dillon, owner of the Outer Banks Motel where Daniel had been staying, remembered his kind and friendly demeanor. "He was like a ray of sunshine," she said. Ryan Dawson, a 19-year-old from Buxton who helped in the rescue, expressed his grief over the tragedy. "I was just hoping he'd be alive when we got him out," he said, saddened by the outcome. Daniel Jones's tragic death shows the hidden dangers of everyday activities. Although seemingly harmless, digging deep holes in the sand can turn deadly when the walls collapse. Despite the overwhelming effort from those around him, Daniel could not be saved, leaving his family and friends to grieve the loss of a bright and caring young man.
Began as an ordinary Sunday in a quiet village near Heidenheim in Germany. Ludwig A. 79-year-old man, and his wife, 80-year-old Inge, spent the first part of their day going to church. And then, it was time for their traditional Sunday roast. But the couple decided to forego this culinary tradition for a hearty vegetable stew. By the end of the day, it was clear that this seemingly innocent event would lead to an unimaginable tragedy. The couple had received zucchini from Ludwig's sister-in-law's garden, something that had become a yearly tradition by then. Alongside potatoes, onions, and turnips, the zucchini became the centerpiece of their lunch. As they ate, though, they noticed something was unusual about their stew. The dish was uncharacteristically bitter. They were accustomed to bitter taste since they grew and enjoyed radishes from their garden. But this was different. Ing chose not to finish her meal. Ludwig, however, ate his portion despite the bitterness. 2 hours later, they came to regret their decision. Both fell violently ill. Nausea and relentless vomiting gripped them, accompanied by diarrhea. Out of the two of them, though, Ludwig was faring worse. His condition rapidly worsened. His strength dwindled. And then, his face turned yellow. Alarmed, they decided it was time to seek medical help. Their family doctor promptly referred them to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed severe poisoning. The culprit, cucurbitacin, a toxic compound sometimes found in plants of the Cucurbitaceae family, including zucchini. The toxic compound is rare in cultivated vegetables, but can occasionally reappear due to cross-pollination with wild plants. Its bitter taste serves as a warning, but Ludwig and Ing had been unaware of its danger. The toxin attacked their organs with devastating effects. In Ludwig's case, his lungs became inflamed, and according to Ing, the toxin shredded his intestines. Ing, who had eaten less and vomited more frequently, began to recover. Ludwig's condition, however, spiraled downward. Inga made a full recovery and was discharged from the hospital, but Ludwig wasn't as fortunate. 3 days later, Ludwig A. passed away. Ing later reflected that her survival might have been due to her swift and severe reaction to the toxin, which expelled much of it from her system before it could do irreparable harm. His tragic death prompted investigations by health authorities and the Ellwangen Public Prosecutor's Office. The Chemical and Veterinary Investigation Office, also known as CVUA, issued an urgent warning. Vegetables such as zucchini, pumpkins, and cucumbers that taste bitter should not be consumed, as this could indicate the presence of cucurbitacin. Maria Roth, the CVUA's director, confirmed that Ludwig's death was the first recorded fatality from this toxin in zucchini.
August 14th, 2010, a warm Saturday morning in Kentucky. Kalita Nicole Hicks, a 20-year-old from Olive Hill, was driving down Country Road 519 in her Chevy. Kalita lived with her parents, John and Janice Abney Hicks. She also had a brother, Jeremy Clayton, and a sister, Stephanie Campbell. That day, Kalita and her passenger decided to make a dangerous move. They planned to switch seats while the car was still moving. Kalita's Chevy had an open T-top, and they believed this would make the swap possible. Their idea was for Kalita to climb onto the roof, while her passenger slid into the driver's seat. Kalita began to pull herself onto the roof of the speeding car, but things took a fatal turn. As she climbed, she lost her balance. Her foot hit the steering wheel, causing the vehicle to swerve. Her passenger tried to regain control by grabbing the wheel, but Kalita had already fallen out of the car. As she fell, Kalita hit a guardrail at a high speed, suffering catastrophic injuries. She was rushed to the University of Kentucky Medical Center in Lexington, where she underwent surgery, but she could not be saved. Kalita passed away later that morning. The Fayette County Coroner's Office confirmed that her injuries from the fall were the cause of her death. Her death was not only tragic, but entirely avoidable. The reckless decision to switch seats while the car was moving cost Kalita her life. Meanwhile, despite avoiding further disaster, the passenger faced legal consequences. He was arrested and charged with driving on a suspended license, improper registration, and having no insurance. Kalita's sudden death devastated her family. Her parents, John and Janice, were left heartbroken. Her siblings, Jeremy and Stephanie, struggled to cope with the loss. Her grandparents, Alfred and Mary Shrum Hicks, along with the rest of her family and friends, mourned the tragic accident. On August 17, 2010, Kalita was laid to rest. Her funeral took place at Globe Funeral Chapel in Olive Hill, Kentucky. Kalita was buried in the Hicks family cemetery on Garvin Ridge in Olive Hill, surrounded by her grieving loved ones. Kalita's story later appeared in the Darwin Awards, a platform highlighting deaths resulting from reckless behavior. The Rydam Cowgirl entry labeled Kalita's death as a cautionary story, a harsh lesson about the dangers of risky actions. There are many lessons to be learned from this tragedy. Most importantly, it shows the dangers of not taking road safety seriously. Attempting dangerous stunts while driving can have dire consequences. While Kalita's passenger tried to prevent a worse outcome by grabbing the wheel, his irresponsible decision, driving on a suspended license, contributed to the situation. Kalita's death forces us to reflect on how things could have gone differently. What if they had simply pulled over to switch seats safely? What if they had considered the potential consequences before taking such a risk? Kalita Nicole Hicks, born in 1989, lost her life at just 20 years old due to a single impulsive decision. Her death tells us the importance of road safety, leaving her family and community to grieve the loss of a young woman with so much ahead of her. It was November 30th, 2004, in Kent, Washington. Philip Quinn, a 24-year-old man, was found dead in his trailer home after a tragic accident involving a lava lamp. Known for his curiosity, Philip was excited to try out his new lava lamp, a decorative item popular for the gentle movement of wax inside. These lamps heat the wax with a bulb, causing it to rise and fall inside a glass container. The lamp is designed to operate at around 60 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit, with the wax melting slowly under the gentle heat of a 40-watt bulb. Philip's eagerness to see the lamp in action led to a fatal mistake. Philip grew impatient when the lava lamp didn't start working as quickly as he expected. Instead of waiting, he placed the lamp on his kitchen stove to speed up the process. This decision turned deadly, as the lamp's glass container was not built to handle the direct heat from a stove. The intense heat rapidly overheated the liquid and wax inside the bottle, causing them to expand faster than they were designed to. The wax, which normally rises and falls in a slow cycle, was now heating uncontrollably. Lava lamps are meant to function under controlled temperatures, and the stove's heat pushed the temperature far beyond safe limits. As the pressure inside the glass bottle grew, the lamp's structure couldn't contain it. Within moments, the bottle exploded. A large shard of glass from the lava lamp was propelled through the air with force, striking Philip directly in the chest. The glass pierced his heart, causing a fatal injury. In shock and immense pain, Philip managed to stumble into his bedroom before collapsing. His parents later found him lying dead on the floor, with the remains of the lava lamp scattered across the kitchen. Investigators quickly ruled out foul play or substance use. They determined that Philip's death was the result of an unfortunate accident caused by his impatience. Had he followed the safety guidelines provided with the lamp, the tragedy could have been avoided. During the investigation, police noted the burnt and shattered remains of the lava lamp in the kitchen. It was clear that Philip had tried to speed up the process by using the stove, leading to the explosion. Experts pieced together what likely happened. The wax inside the bottle finally began to move just before the glass container shattered from the excessive heat, sending deadly shards flying. The incident drew public attention, reminding everyone of the importance of following product safety instructions. Lava lamp manufacturers warn against placing the lamps near direct heat sources like stoves, as this poses a significant risk of overheating and explosion. Philip Quinn's death was even investigated by the popular TV show Mythbusters in 2006. In episode 17, the team attempted to recreate the circumstances of his death. They heated a lava lamp on an electric hot plate and used a human ribcage replica to simulate the effect. Their experiment confirmed that the lava lamp could explode when overheated, sending glass shards flying with dangerous force. While Mythbusters demonstrated that an explosion was possible, they didn't find a glass shard embedded in the torso of their human model, as Philip had experienced. However, their tests showed that the extreme heat from the stove caused the pressure inside the lamp to rise rapidly, making the explosion inevitable. Philip Quinn's story exemplifies how a moment of impatience can turn deadly. It underscores the importance of following safety guidelines and using household items correctly. While lava lamps are mesmerizing and beautiful, they are designed to function under specific conditions. When those conditions are ignored, even something as harmless as a decorative lamp can become dangerous.
January 2007, Sheila K. Ross and her husband Dane, seasoned truck drivers from McLeod, Oklahoma, were on a routine trip. They had traveled to Yuma, Arizona to collect supplies from a Dole plant. But what began as an ordinary evening would take a devastating turn, changing the lives of all those involved. That evening, when they arrived at the plant in Arizona, Sheila exited their truck to retrieve paperwork for their load. But when the 47-year-old woman failed to return, her husband Dane became overcome by worry. He too exited the truck and searched the premises himself, but there was no sign of his wife. Dane decided to notify the Yuma police and ask for their help. Officers conducted an extensive search but found no sign of Sheila. As hours turned into days, her disappearance remained a mystery. 3 days later, a dock worker at the Hy-Vee grocery store distribution center in Chariton, Iowa, made a grim discovery. Sheila's body was found in the back of a semi-trailer delivering lettuce. The trailer, owned by a different trucking company, had been at the same Dole plant in Yuma on the night Sheila disappeared. Authorities determined that Sheila had been pinned inside the truck during loading, and the compressive force of the pallets of lettuce caused her death. According to Dr. John Kramer, the autopsy showed Sheila was as Investigators believe Sheila was accidentally pushed into the trailer by a forklift operating in the loading area. Unnoticed by the driver, she became trapped between the heavy pallets of produce. The intense pressure left her unable to breathe. Her body remained undetected as the trailer traveled nearly 1,500 miles to Iowa. Sheila died on Tuesday, January 30th, 2007. Statements from Dole confirmed the company's cooperation with law enforcement, but offered little solace to Sheila's grieving family. The lettuce in the shipment was destroyed, a minor detail in the face of such a profound loss. Sheila, remembered as a dedicated truck driver and loving wife, had worked alongside Dane for years. Married in 1980, the couple shared a son, Daniel, and a granddaughter. Her funeral service, held on February 5, 2007, brought together family and friends to honor her memory. It was December 8, 2015, in Patagonia, Chile. Douglas Tompkins, the 72-year-old founder of the North Face, was kayaking on General Carrera Lake. This massive lake spans 1,150 square miles and is known for its breathtaking scenery and dangerous waters. It is also infamous for sudden storms caused by unpredictable weather and strong winds. Tompkins, an outdoor enthusiast, had built a career around his love for nature. From rock climbing as a teenager to creating one of the most iconic outdoor gear brands, his connection to the wilderness was undeniable. In later years, he became a devoted environmentalist, purchasing large tracts of land in Chile and Argentina to protect Patagonia's beauty. These lands became conservation parks, a legacy of his efforts to safeguard nature. On this particular day, Tompkins was kayaking with 5 others. A sudden storm swept over the lake as they paddled, turning calm waters into towering waves up to 3 meters high. The group struggled against the storm but couldn't maintain control. All 6 kayaks overturned, throwing the kayakers into the freezing water. The lake's temperature rarely exceeds 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit, and cold water like this can cause hypothermia within minutes. Struggling in the icy waters, 3 kayakers managed to swim to a small island, but Tompkins and 2 others remained in the lake, unable to reach safety. Tompkins, who had spent his life advocating for outdoor safety and designing gear to protect people in extreme conditions, now found himself vulnerable to the elements. Despite having the knowledge and equipment to face such situations, the extreme cold took its toll. Emergency responders acted quickly. A military patrol boat and a helicopter were dispatched to rescue the stranded group. 3 kayakers were pulled from the water by boat, while Tompkins and the others were airlifted to the nearest hospital in Coyhaique, about 1,000 miles south of Santiago. By the time Tompkins arrived, his body temperature had dropped to 19 degrees Celsius, or 66 degrees Fahrenheit, far below what the human body can survive. Medical staff worked tirelessly to warm him, but his condition was critical. Despite their efforts, Tompkins passed away at 6:30 p.m., a victim of severe hypothermia. His death profoundly affected his family and the global outdoor and environmental communities. Tompkins' passing sparked tributes from around the world. The North Face, the company he co-founded in 1966, called him a passionate environmental advocate. His work in conservation and his commitment to protecting natural landscapes were praised widely. His death, however, carried a deep irony. Despite his lifelong dedication to mastering and protecting the outdoors, nature proved more powerful than any preparation. Born in 1943 in Ohio and raised in Millbrook, New York, Tompkins showed an early love for the outdoors. By his teens, he was rock climbing in the Shawangunk Mountains. At 17, he left prep school and moved west, skiing and climbing in Colorado and California. His passion for wilderness set the course for his future. 1966, Tompkins co-founded the North Face, initially catering to serious skiers and climbers. The company grew into a global outdoor gear brand, but by 1969 he sold his share and pursued new ventures. He co-founded Esprit, a multinational clothing company, alongside his first wife, Susie Russell. However, after their divorce in 1989, Tompkins left the fashion industry, disillusioned by its role in environmental harm. From then on, he dedicated his life to conservation. In the 1990s, Tompkins moved to Chile and began buying land in Patagonia to protect it from industrial development. In 1991, he founded Pumalin Park, a 716 606-acre reserve stretching from the Andes to the Pacific. Working with his second wife, Christine Tompkins, former CEO of the Patagonia clothing brand, he expanded these efforts, turning vast areas into protected lands. Though some Chilean politicians accused Tompkins of land grabbing, many viewed him as a visionary who used his wealth to preserve nature. His dedication to protecting Patagonia's landscapes inspired conservationists worldwide. At his death, Tompkins had secured millions of acres of land for conservation, ensuring their protection for future generations. While his loss was devastating, his work left a lasting impact on the environmental movement. Tompkins spent his life advocating for the natural world, And though his final moments were shaped by the wilderness he loved, his legacy continues in the lands he preserved. It was late afternoon of January 29, 1931, when neighbors and friends gathered at Edward and Delphine Hines' farmstead near Grafton, North Dakota. The Hines were throwing a festive dinner party which promised to be an evening of dancing, laughter, and games, a much-needed reprieve from the harsh winter. But as the night wore on, the unsuspecting guests were served a meal that would forever be marked in North Dakota's history. The party concluded with a late-night spread prepared by Delphine. Among the courses was a pea salad featuring home-canned peas, which Delphine had prepared herself, mayonnaise, cheese, and lettuce. Unbeknownst to everyone, including the Hines, these peas harbored a hidden deadly menace. The nightmare began the following day. Arthur Duranby, a 31-year-old farmer, experienced intense stomach pains while tending to his chores. He alerted his family, which rushed to his aid, but not even them or the doctors they employed could save Arthur. By Saturday, he had slipped into a coma. In the meantime, the doctors had figured out the cause of Arthur's illness, the botulinum toxin, produced by the bacteria Clostridium botulinum. On Saturday afternoon, Arthur Duranby succumbed to the toxin's effects. His death marked the beginning of an unrelenting series of tragedies. Harry Chapioski, an 8th grader who had attended the party, appeared healthy enough to play in a basketball game on Friday. Yet by the next evening, he too was gone. Harry's mom, Mrs. Thomas Chapioski, died a day later, followed closely by her lifelong friend, who had also attended the party, Mrs. Elmer Stoke. Delphine Hine and her family were not spared. The first to fall ill was Edward Jr., her 16-year-old son, who passed away on Saturday evening. Delphine herself succumbed just 4 hours later. By Sunday night, Edward Sr. and their eldest daughter, 20-year-old Elizabeth, had also perished. Genevieve, only 15, followed early Monday morning. The poison did not discriminate, taking the lives of 13 party attendees over 9 days. Among the deceased were lifelong friends, close relatives, and neighbors. The deaths were eerily consistent, with symptoms of dizziness, impaired vision, and respiratory failure marking the toxin's lethal progression. Those who survived, such as Elmer Stoke, were spared only by chance. Elmer had not eaten the salad. Medical experts acted swiftly once botulism was identified as the culprit. A specialist from the University of Chicago traveled to Grafton with antitoxin serum, but the treatment was rare and prohibitively expensive. It was also only effective if administered early in the illness, and by the time it reached the town, most victims were beyond saving. The last fatality, Winfield Ware, died 9 days after the party, having shown signs of improvement before his condition rapidly deteriorated. Elmer Stoke wasn't the only survivor. 3 of the Hine children also survived. 14-year-old Richard, 12-year-old Wilfred, and 3-year-old Marvin had been spared only because they were too young to join the party and had remained in their rooms that night. Yet their survival came at an unimaginable cost. They lost both parents and 3 siblings in a matter of days. The boys were taken in by relatives, but their lives were forever altered. Richard, known as Dick, grew up quickly, leaving his relatives' home to work as a farm laborer. He would go on to establish his successful dairy operation in Minnesota, passing away in 2013 at age 96. Wilfred, or Bill, worked in California's aircraft industry, while Marvin, affectionately called Buddy, returned to North Dakota after serving in World War II and built a life in the grain business. Despite their resilience, the trauma of the event lingered with them. Dick's poignant plea to save their mother's wedding ring so they would have something to remember her by underscored the depth of their loss. It was a tragedy unlike anything Grafton or North America had seen before. Residents mourned the victims during a 4-day funeral procession, during which the town closed its businesses and declared a period of mourning. Fear spread as homemakers threw away their home-canned goods, many discarding entire pantries, despite the economic hardship of the Great Depression. For months, some families subsisted on little more than toast and tea, wary of hidden dangers lurking in their food. But there are lessons to be learned even in the darkest of times. The disaster prompted greater scrutiny of home canning practices, highlighting the importance of proper sterilization and the use of pressure canners for low-acid foods. Though botulism remains rare, the Grafton tragedy stands as a stark reminder of its deadly potential. Today, advancements in food safety guidelines and education seek to prevent such a tragedy from recurring. However, the memory of the Poison Pea Party became a cautionary tale, etched into the history of a town that would never forget. September 26, 2010, in Boston Spa, a small West Yorkshire, England village, Jimmy Heselden, a 62-year-old businessman and philanthropist, was riding a Segway X2. This rugged off-road model designed to handle uneven terrain was part of the product line of Segway Incorporated, the company he owned. Heselden had recently acquired the company and hoped to revive its fortunes after its initial buzz in the early 2000s had faded. Heselden was riding along a narrow bridleway near the river wharf. The path was uneven with tree roots and ruts and ran above a steep drop into the river. While riding, Heselden encountered Sean Christie, who was walking his dog. To make room for Christie to pass, Heselden reversed his Segway. The uneven ground made balancing difficult and the Segway slipped, sending Heselden over the edge. He fell approximately 42 feet into the river below. Christie rushed to help and found Heselden unresponsive in the water. Emergency services were called, but by the time they arrived, it was clear Heselden had passed away. Investigators determined there was no malfunction with the Segway, and the coroner ruled the death an accident caused by the fall. The incident was a tragic result of an act of courtesy and the difficult terrain. Heselden's death was particularly ironic because it involved the very product he was trying to promote. Known as one of the wealthiest men in the UK, he had built his fortune through Hesco Bastion. This company manufactures collapsible wire mesh containers for protective barriers in military zones. Despite his wealth, Heselden remained grounded, often giving generously to charity. He donated millions to local causes, including £10 million to the Leeds Community Foundation. The Segway was intended to revolutionize personal transport, but struggled to gain widespread acceptance. While it was designed to be safe, questions arose about its suitability for rough terrain. However, the investigation confirmed that the Segway was functioning properly and that the accident was caused by the challenging conditions and Heselden's movement on the path. After Heselden's passing, Segway Incorporated faced an uncertain future. In 2013, it was sold to Roger Brown, who aimed to make the product more accessible by reducing costs and redesigning its features. Segway later gained modest success in the ride-sharing industry, with companies like Bird and Lime using it for urban transportation. In 2015, Ninebot acquired Segway, helping improve its profitability by adapting the brand to meet new market demands. Despite these efforts, the original Segway was discontinued in 2020. The company shifted its focus to electric bikes, scooters, and other technologies, leaving behind the ambitious invention that promised to change how people moved. Heselden's death sparked discussions about safety and the limitations of technology. His legacy as a philanthropist and successful entrepreneur remains significant, but his tragic accident while riding the Segway tells us about the unpredictability of life. It was July 28, 1980, when 32-year-old Troy Leon Gregg escaped from Georgia State Prison. He was on death row for a double homicide and armed robbery in 1973. That night, Gregg and inmates Timothy McCorquodale, Johnny L. Johnson, and David Jarrell carried out an audacious escape plan. They sawed through cell bars, climbed ledges, and disguised themselves in stolen prison guard uniforms. Their plan worked, and they passed through several security checks unnoticed. This marked the first successful death row escape in Georgia's history. Once outside, they reached a car parked by a relative of one of the inmates. For a brief moment, they tasted freedom. However, Gregg's escape took a tragic turn before the night ended. Gregg's story began in 1973 when he was 25. While hitchhiking through Florida with 16-year-old Floyd Allen, they were picked up by Fred Simmons and Bob Moore. Simmons' car broke down during their journey, and he purchased another vehicle with his own money. Hours later, events spiraled into violence. Gregg claimed Simmons attacked him during an argument, forcing him to act in self-defense. He said he shot Simmons and Moore to protect himself. Allen, however, told a different story. He testified that Gregg had planned to rob the men and had confided this plan to him. According to Allen, Gregg shot Simmons and Moore, then ensured they were no longer alive before taking their belongings and stealing the car. They drove off but were eventually caught when a previous companion, Dennis Weaver, recognized the victims in a newspaper and alerted authorities. Gregg was arrested with a .25 caliber handgun and later convicted of robbery and the deaths of Simmons and Moore, receiving a death sentence. Gregg's trial became significant in U.S. legal history. His case was among the first to uphold a death sentence after the Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in 1976 following the Furman v. Georgia decision. Gregg's case introduced a two-phase trial system to ensure fairness in sentencing. Despite his conviction, Gregg never stopped planning his escape. On the night of July 28, 1980, He and the other inmates carried out their plan. They exited their cells, reached a fire escape, and walked past guards disguised as staff members. Afterward, Greg called a local newspaper, the Albany Herald, to complain about prison conditions. This call tipped off officials about his escape. By nightfall, Greg found himself in a North Carolina bar. Accounts of what happened next vary. One version suggests Greg, under the influence of alcohol, confronted a waitress, leading to an altercation with a biker who defended her. The confrontation escalated and Greg was fatally beaten. Another version claims that his fellow escapees turned on him, accusing him of betraying them by revealing their escape plan. They allegedly attacked him in a fit of anger. Regardless of the details, Greg's body was later found in the Catawba River. His cause of death was determined to be suffocation caused by swelling from severe injuries. Meanwhile, the remaining escapees didn't get far. Within 3 days, McCorquodale, Johnson, and Jarrell were captured in an abandoned house. Though McCorquodale and another man, James Cecil Horn, were initially charged in connection with Greg's death, the charges were later dropped due to insufficient evidence. The exact circumstances of Greg's death remain unresolved. Troy Leon Gregg's escape ended mere hours after it began, with his death under mysterious and violent circumstances. He had spent years on death row, and his brief taste of freedom was cut short by events eerily similar to the crimes that had landed him there. Greg's story leaves many unanswered questions. What if he had successfully escaped? Could he have started a new life? Or would his past eventually catch up? What if his fellow escapees had remained united? Or if they had all evaded capture? Such questions linger, but the one certainty is that Greg's story exemplifies how actions often have unavoidable consequences, no matter how far in the past. His life and death remain tied to the history of the death penalty in the United States, a haunting reminder of justice, fate, and the irony of his final hours. 28th, 2010 was supposed to be an ordinary day in Mount Carroll, Illinois. As morning came, 3 young men, Wyatt Whitebread, Alex Pacas, and Will Piper, made their way toward the Hosbach Grain Storage Complex, where they were supposed to walk down the corn. Yet by nightfall, the rural town would be gripped by unspeakable tragedy. At 14 years old, Wyatt Whitebread was a spirited boy. He had been excited to earn his first paycheck working at the Hosbach Grain Storage Complex. But things had changed. Wyatt had recently expressed unease about the nature of his work, even proclaiming that he wished he never had to see another kernel of corn for the rest of his life. His co-workers were 19-year-old Alex Pacas and 20-year-old Will Piper. None of them had experience in grain handling, which had proved to be a lot more complicated than they'd anticipated. And none of them fully grasped the dangers of the task they faced that day, breaking up clogged corn in a grain bin towering 4 stories high. The job, referred to as walking down the corn, required the boys to shovel kernels toward a central drain hole at the bottom of the bin, allowing the corn to flow freely into the conveyor below. The work began smoothly, but the conditions were dangerous. Beneath the 250,000 bushels of damp, compacted corn was an active conveyor system whose continuous movement turned the grain into a fluid trap. It was about 9:45 a.m. that day when 14-year-old Wyatt began sinking into the corn, the damp grain swallowing him like quicksand. Alex and Will sprang into action. The older boys attempted to pull Wyatt free, grasping him under the arms, but it was useless. The unstable surface gave way beneath their feet, and before they knew it, Alex and Will started to sink as well. Wyatt disappeared first, buried by the cascading corn. Alex and Will struggled to stay afloat as the grains piled relentlessly around them. Alex's cries for help grew fainter as the corn reached his neck and then his chin. Will, trapped up to his chest, used his free arm to try and keep the kernels away from Alex's head. But Will couldn't keep up with the cascade of corn. Soon after, he couldn't do anything but watch in horror as his friend succumbed and wondered if he was going to be next. By now, the corn was up to his chin. Hosbach supervisor Matt Schaffner called for help and then climbed into the bin himself to try to dig the boys out. But he quickly realized it was an impossible task. The Mount Carroll Fire Department arrived within minutes, quickly realizing the enormity of the situation. Grain bins are notoriously treacherous, and extracting victims from them requires specialized techniques. Firefighters, paramedics, and technical rescue teams converged on the site, eventually numbering over 200 responders. Rescuers employed grain vacuums, custom-made rescue tubes, and even improvised methods like cutting the bottom out of a bucket to shield Will's face. They worked tirelessly in stifling heat, battling a heat index of 114 degrees inside the metal silo. Despite their efforts, progress was painstakingly slow. Will Piper remained trapped for nearly 6 hours, his body immobilized and his mind haunted by the death of his friends. At one point, rescuers instructed him to embrace Alex's lifeless body to create space for the vacuum to work. Will was eventually rescued and taken to the hospital. Alex's body was retrieved, but Wyatt's remains were buried under layers of corn. Rescuers worked late into the night, finally recovering the 14-year-old's remains. The loss of Wyatt Whitebread and Alex Packus devastated their families. Will Piper faced profound emotional scars. Even more, the tragedy revealed glaring safety failures at Hassbach LC. OSHA's investigation uncovered 25 safety violations, including 12 classified as willful. The boys had received no safety training, were not equipped with harnesses, and were sent into the bin while the machinery below remained operational, a direct violation of safety protocols. Hassbach LLC was initially fined $555,000, but this was later reduced to $200,000, igniting outrage among the victims' families. Civil lawsuits followed, with a jury awarding nearly $17 million in damages, $8 million each to the families of Wyatt and Alex, and $875,000 to Will. The verdict marked a record for Carroll County, but brought little solace to the grieving families. Wyatt's mother, Carla, a retired Army major, struggled with the knowledge that Wyatt hadn't told her he was running down corn. Alex's mother, Annette, grappled with the knowledge that her son died in terror, his final moments consumed by fear. Nothing could bring their children back.
It was the evening of September 2008 in Edlington, South Yorkshire, England. Andrew Lee, a 33-year-old aspiring chef and forklift driver, had decided to participate in a daring challenge. Known for his love of cooking, Andrew wanted to test his limits with an incredibly spicy chili sauce. Cooking was more than a hobby for Andrew. He was passionate about trying new recipes and dreamed of someday becoming a chef in France. His room was filled with cookbooks, and he often created new dishes. On this particular evening, Andrew made a bet with his girlfriend's brother, Michael. The challenge was simple but risky, to see who could handle eating the hottest chili sauce. Andrew's father had grown the peppers used in the sauce, specially cultivated for the contest. With their plates ready, Andrew and Michael began the challenge. They ate the sauce with nachos, and Andrew added it to a plate of pasta. This was no ordinary sauce. It was made from some of the hottest peppers available. Even for someone like Andrew, who regularly used chili in his cooking, this was beyond what he had ever tried. At first, both men experienced the expected intense heat. Their faces turned red, and sweat poured down their skin. The sauce was overwhelming, but Andrew powered through. However, soon after the contest, Andrew started to feel an unusual itching sensation, which concerned him, but not enough to seek help immediately. As the night continued, Andrew's discomfort worsened. By 2:30 a.m., he went to bed at his girlfriend Samantha Bailey's house, still feeling the itch. Samantha, who had 4 children, tried to comfort him by scratching his back until he finally fell asleep. The next morning, Samantha woke up to a nightmare. Andrew was unresponsive, lying still in bed. She called for an ambulance, but despite the paramedics' best efforts, Andrew was declared dead at the scene. His sudden death shocked everyone. Andrew had been a healthy man and had recently passed a full medical examination at work. No one could understand how a simple chili eating contest could have such a tragic outcome. An inquest was launched and a post-mortem examination was conducted, but it didn't provide a clear cause of death. To further investigate, toxicology tests were ordered to see if the chili sauce could have caused a fatal reaction. Medical experts explained that allergic responses to chili peppers are rare, but possible. Capsaicin, the compound that makes chilies hot, has some health benefits, but can also cause serious issues in large amounts. Andrew's mother, Pamela, was devastated by her son's sudden death. She described him as a healthy, ambitious man who loved cooking and couldn't understand how such a normal activity could end in such a tragedy. The family waited anxiously for answers, hoping the toxicology results would clarify. This event raised awareness of the potential dangers of consuming extremely spicy foods. Health experts warned against the trend of breeding hotter and hotter chili varieties, noting that even mild reactions can include burning eyes, a runny nose, and hiccups. In rare cases, severe reactions can lead to more serious complications, including heart issues, which might have happened in Andrew's case. Though the exact cause of his death remains unclear, it's evident that the ultra-hot chili sauce played a significant role. Andrew's love for cooking and willingness to take on culinary challenges ended unexpectedly and heartbreakingly. What if Andrew had decided to skip the challenge that night? What if he had seen the itching as a sign to get medical help? These lingering questions show us the risks that sometimes come with even the most innocent activities.